dum diddy dum diddy dum.
Hello and welcome to the Analyst Inside Cricket, this podcast in association with LV Insurance. And we're looking back at the second day of the third LV Insurance Test match at Headingley. A day of elation and sadness, I suppose you could say today, because obviously highlight was Joe Root's brilliant century, the third of the series, and he's just a run machine. But certainly tinged with sadness today because the announcement of Ted Dexter's death came overnight, early in the morning. All the players wore black armbands, all the England players wore black armbands. And in a way, I suppose England's innings, and especially Joe Root's innings, was a sort of little tribute to Ted Dexter. He would have loved to see Joe Root bat the way he did. He was he liked conventional batting, although he was an innovator. He liked the sideways on approach to batting. In fact, I've got a picture here that I can show of Ted Dexter batting one day, and you can see the orthodox nature of his stance, playing a West Indies fast bowler, side on, toes on his toes, playing the ball down right underneath his nose. He was a cavalier batsman, but he did play in a classic way, and I knew him well, so I can certainly tell a little story about him. But I know he loved Joe Root, and so he would have been proud to have seen that innings by Joe today.
Well, Joe Root did an interview at the start of the day's play, and partly to pay tribute to Ted Dexter, and he said, I didn't spend much time with him. I wasn't actually sure whether he'd even met him, but what he did say was that Ted Dexter used to email him about his batting and pass on tips. Why don't you do this, or why don't you do that? And that shows someone who's got a sort of real sort of love for the game, really, doesn't it? And it still wants to be involved and pass on that knowledge. I mean, I didn't know Ted Dexter at all. I remember I did interview him. I remember distinctly once when I was in Australia in the early 90s. He'd just come from India, where there was the smog. He talked about the smog in Calcutta, and was it the stars not being aligned, and that sort of thing, that terrible tour that England had in India. But anyway, he gave me what was actually a little bit of an exclusive at the time. He said, next summer in England, we're going to introduce technology for run-outs and stumpings. And I remember, that's quite a good story, because that was quite revolutionary at the time. We're so used to it now. And so I put that on the Today programme, and immediately, or within an hour, the ECB, or the Test and County Cricket Board, I think it was, then knocked it down, saying absolute rubbish. This is not going to happen. It's sort of thought, oh, Ted, what have you done? Have you sort of, have you gone off on a bit of a flyer here? But of course, what happened the following summer in England? Technology was introduced for run out things, and we now, and it's part of the game, a brilliant innovation. So thanks very much, Ted, for that exclusive back in the early 90s. But I mean, I remember his time as chairman of selectors, in charge of the England team. But you obviously knew him much better, Simon.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's good that you mentioned the sort of innovative side of his character, because actually in a way, he's the founding father of short form cricket. In the 60s, when the Gillette Cup had already been launched, and it was then 65 overs, he was approached by the BBC to find a way of creating a shorter format for Sundays, because in those days, Sundays wasn't a playing day for professionals. And actually the Cavaliers, the International Cavaliers, the Rothmans International Cavaliers that Dexter played for, which was a selection of sort of world-class players, would play on Sundays, but just sort of invitation exhibition games. And so the BBC came to Dexter and said, how about creating a shorter format that will fit into Sunday afternoons for professionals, for counties, and it will be finished at 6 o'clock. And so he came up with the idea of 40 overs and shortened run-ups, which was the bane of my life when I started playing, having to shorten my run-up to 15 yards. But it also meant the game was over in just over 4 hours, with one or two other rule introductions as well. Dexter was the founding father of that. And also, famously he introduced Deloitte's ratings as well, player ratings, because he said he was pissed off that Boycott was always top of the averages, and he wanted to find another way of evaluating players using a different system, which is still the industry standard. So he was an innovator, never mind a brilliant player. I knew him from the age of about 10 because we went to the same church. And actually, when I was a bit older, he had to endure my organ playing because I was a part-time organist at this church. it didn't seem to put him off coming. And he was a great assistant, sort of helper, advisor to me throughout my career. Unfortunately, didn't manage to help my batting at all. But there we are. Maybe that was a lost cause. And just a wonderful person, always interested, always fascinated, as you say, sending emails to Joe Root, talking about technique, always coming into the commentary box and pointing out things about batsmen, even in his 80s, ideas about how to bowl at them and the best way of batting. And of course, going back to Joe Root, why he would really have celebrated Joe Root's innings today and his performance over this summer is because he greatly believed that batting is a sideways game. And he actually said, you bat in a bath, not a piss pot. And what he meant by that was that you go up and down and keep your footwork narrow towards the ball rather than going round and having a sort of open stance, a bit more like a round vessel. He believed you should bat as if in a bath, with the bath obviously sort of pointing down the wicket. So that's his legacy. It's one of his legacies. And what a wonderful guy. Very sad to see him go, but a wonderful ambassador for the game and a wonderful player.
Yeah, well, I never saw him bat, which I'm sad I didn't see him bat, because by all accounts he was a tremendously aggressive and an exciting player. But the things you learn on this podcast, Yoz, that he used to listen to you playing the organ. Do you still play the organ or not? I mean, what happened to your organ career?
It really didn't last terribly long. I think I was sacked in the end for playing the wrong tune, for playing Send in the Clowns during a wedding. It was a little medley I'd devised before the bride actually entered the church, and she entered the church a bit early. So the Send in the Clowns tune was sort of playing as she walked up the aisle. And I think that was probably my last attempt. I was put out.
That sounds about right.
That
sounds about right. Okay, let's turn to the second day of this third Test match, sponsored by LV Insurance. And I mean, England are pretty much done today what they set out to do. I would say. I mean, they're in such a dominant position in the game. I thought they did get a bit careless, which is sort of nitpick a little bit towards the end of the day's play. I think a few wickets were frittered away, and I thought at one point all this lead is going to be about 300 rather than the 350, 400, which it should have been. And if you're really ruthless, you don't give India a sniff. And it's such an outside shot for India with a massive lead, 345. But there's lots of time left in the match. Worst case scenario, we talked about it last night, is they do get 500 in their second innings, on a decent pitch, and England have a little run chase on the final day, an awkward little run chase on the final day. Anyway, that's the absolute worst case scenario, and England can help their cause, of course, in the morning by just adding, another 20 or 30 runs for the last two wickets. And they've got two players there who are capable of doing that in Overton and Robinson, and we'll see how they get on. There is your who's winning graphic.
The who's winning. Yeah. We don't really need the who's winning graphic today, but it does tell you that England's dominance is almost irreversible. 90%, 91% chance of winning. India down at 1.3, and the draw about 4 or 5%. So it very much is a very unlikely scenario that India could possibly win this game. And actually, I think that no team has overcome a deficit of more than 331, and the deficit is now 345. And actually, I looked at the match, that famous match in Calcutta, which of course India won in 2001 against Australia when they were asked to follow on, and they were only 274 behind in that Test match.
That's right.
And then went on to make 650 and bowl Australia out for a dramatic and kind of totally extraordinary victory. But they were only 274 behind. Obviously, history is always something to be rewritten, but no team has ever overcome more than 331. So England should be, very confident of victory.
Well, they're in a position beyond their wildest dreams. If you said to them after 2 days of this Test match, they'll be 345 ahead with two first innings wickets in hand, and having bowled India out for next to nothing. I mean, that it's so rare that you get much better than that, and they'll be very confident going on to win this Test match. I mean, they might even win it on the third day. I mean, you've got to remember the pressure that India are under in this Test match as well, especially if the overnight pair were able to go out and whack 20 or 30 more to demoralised them a little bit more. There's a little role for lower order play more, but even with the runs in the bank, England, in a fantastic position. And you talk about history, Oz, and that Calcutta Test match. Well, the middle of Headingley, Australia's first lead in that match was 220. England had 345 runs in the bank. I know this pitch is a bit better, but as the game goes on, there might be a little bit there for the bowlers and possibly for Mo and Ali as well. And there is a whole issue. I mean, you do, I suppose, the both. It's a massive long. Actually, although I did see you talk about who's winning the percentages, I did look on the exchanges this afternoon. At one point, India were 100-1, and the last time I looked, not all the close, they were about something like that in the match. So, I mean, you can see a path for India, but it's a path full of snakes and thorns and ups and downs and treacherous rivers to cross, and a thunderstorm to get through, and and it's a long way away. But anyway, they might see some light in the very far distance. But you'd expect England's 5-man attack to sort them out sometime in the next couple of days.
A tremendous innings by Joe Root. Again, absolutely flawless, really, until a rather tired stroke at the end. I mean, his busyness at the crease was the noticeable fact today. He didn't hit that many boundaries. The Indian bowling was pretty perseverant, but just the willingness to run ones and twos and to look intentful all the time, in the middle was tremendous. I enjoyed his partnership with David Malan. I thought actually Hamid got a little bit stuck and got bowled out. He faced something like 30 dot balls and then got bowled by quite a good one from Jadeja, which I think was a shame. But Malan looked, he was perfect for that situation because he was quite fluent. And it was a surprise, really, when he got out. He'd have been really disappointed about that. Little tiny inside edge down the leg side just before tea. He was a bit unlucky. And then England's innings rather petered out. But, I mean, Root was just superlative throughout. And I don't know how he does it. And
it was interesting what you say about Root's busyness today, because actually it was a quick 124 balls it took him to get to his century, which is very good. Even by modern standards, that's a quick 100. But he only hit. You think of so it'd be 18 fours and 2 sixes or something like that. But that just shows how busy he was. And I noticed first ball off the mark straight away. There was a real positive intent from Joe Root today. 23 Test hundreds now, 600s this year, 500 plus runs in the series, 300s in the series. It's a bit like Steve Smith in an Ashes series. He's just rolling them up. He was a bit tired though, wasn't he, at the end? And there were a few out there who were tired today. We saw Ishant struggling and Siraj struggling on what was not a particularly warm day in Leeds. But anyway, fantastic from Root, and he just sort of battened down England's strong position. Just to pick up something about David Malan, I mean, we talked about this last night, didn't we, about that nervous energy? I mean, he had to wait 50 overs watching on to come into bat. That's a lot of overs for an England number 3. Not many have had to do that in the last few years. And actually, just one more stat: it's only the second time in 8 years that all of England's top 4 have reached 30 plus, let alone 50 plus. They all went over 50, but last time they to only second time 8 years that they all got 30 or more. Anyway, but Malan had to wait, and he looked really good, didn't he? It was a really good innings, and you could tell he nicked it as well. The camera focused on his face, and he said to Joe, they've reviewed it. I think I've hit that. And so as soon as I saw that, I just sort of sensed that there's some doubt there. I realized that he was going to be caught behind him. He caught down the leg side. It feels like a strangle, but a very good day, a very good return for David Malan. The only disappointment for him, I suppose, he didn't go on to make 100.
But it's much nicer coming in at 140 for 1 than 5 for 1. And I wonder what Zach Crawley was thinking, seeing Malan waiting 50 overs to come in when he's been coming in about the 5th over most of the time over the last year or so. So well done to England for building that platform and for pretty much capitalising on it. One of the primary objectives set by the Fund for Runs campaign was to promote and make cricket accessible to all sections of our society. LV Insurance and ECB's £1 million Fund for Runs community initiative has identified the Cheshire Cricket Board's Orford Hub as an ideal fit to kickstart cricket in the centre of Warrington. The funding will go towards an 8-week All-Stars cricket project based in one of Cheshire's most deprived wards. The board will expand this offer with the introduction of dynamos and street cricket leagues with the aim to make the sport more accessible and attractive for wider sections of the community growing up in an urban area.
Interesting. One thing we were talking about before this series was the prospect of India sort of dismantling England's Ashes plans. And they've sort of done that in a way, haven't they? They've got rid of Sibley and they've got rid of Crawley. And they were sort of not inked in for the Ashes, but they were very sort of heavily penciled in for the Ashes. And India have dismantled that top order, but who knows? It might have actually done England a favour. Milan back in the side, very good tour of Australia last time. Hamid, I think the jury's still out a little bit on Hamid, but we'll see. Scoring shots through the offside, whereas Sibley is rock-like, doesn't move, and the scoreboard doesn't move as a result. And we'll see how that works out. But it's going to be difficult for Hamid at the top of the order in Australia against that Kookaburra ball with that high-class Australian attack. But they have dismantled it. But who knows? It might just work in England's favour, or at least help them a little bit in Australia in the winter to have that top order rejigged.
Mm-hmm. A word on India's bowlers. I sort of identified with them a bit, charging in, trundling in, sort of almost stumbling in towards the end of the day. The forlornness of knowing when Root and Milan were building their partnership of how the hell do you get a wicket? And of course, one did come in the end, luckily down the leg side. But I thought particularly Mohammed Shami kept going really well. And it's a tough job because there's no support in the ground, there's nothing in the pitch, the ball's old, batsmen look totally secure and almost sort of invincible, and it's very hard to actually believe, can I take a wicket here? But Shami kept going and he picked up 3 wickets. And I noticed even towards the end of the day, I think in his last over, he bowled an 85-mile-an-hour delivery. That's a tremendous effort. So I award him the LV Insurance In With Heart award today. I mean, he just kept going. He kept plundering it. He kept zipping it down on a length, on a line, giving the batsman absolutely nothing, and constantly believing, and just trimmed England's ambitions a little bit in the end.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. He really is a trier, and ran in for his captain today, and Bumrah as well. Bumrah was tidy and threatening at times. I mean, he was the one that started to unpick Hamid. I thought they bowled short at him, they dried him up, and eventually they got through him. And so that was really good bowling at the start of the day by India. Only 21. A really hard, really gritty, hard fought first hour, and then gradually England got away 300 runs in the day. Bumrah good, but without the breakthroughs that perhaps his captain would have liked. I agree on Shami and Ishan. Awful day for him, really. I mean, he looked 40 plus at times today. 22 overs, 0 for 92, and Jadeja steady. And but you think. Might bring Moeen Ali possibly into the match, and even who knows, even Root and even Milan, even Milan with his leg breaks. But Root and Moeen definitely in that second innings. If India build a biggish score, just stymie them that way, as well as with that 4-man pace attack. So how do you see the game? 3 days to go. The weather forecast looks pretty decent. England win in 3 days, or is that is that being too bullish for England's prospects?
I think the pitch is pretty good still, and obviously India will get stuck in the second innings. So I don't think it will finish tomorrow. I think England will bowl India out for round about 350. They might just have to chase a handful of runs, and India will get stuck in, and they might just take it into the 4th day. I think England will find some. I mean, it'd be perfect time to bowl tomorrow morning. Always in the morning, it does a little bit more. I can see a couple of early wickets falling. And then some people, Kohli, very much due. Rahane and Pujara also. So somebody's going to get really stuck in. And I think India should be able to get past 300, but it's just a question of how much past. So England might have to just do a little bit of batting on the fourth day, is my hunch. What about you?
Yeah, well, I think it could end tomorrow. I think scoreboard pressure could force in for England tomorrow. The other side of it is it India at the close of play, 260 for 2, something like that, digging in, and then then you start to think, oh, is Headingley 81 sort of coming into view? Tarank had an amazing victory at Headingley in 2014, and then as Calcutta we mentioned at the start of this podcast in 2001. But also all cricketing logic suggests that sometime in the next 3 days, whether it is tomorrow, fourth day, or fifth day, sometime in the next 3 days, England will level this series. And if they don't, we are in for something sensational. I think that's fair to say. But you'd expect it to be 1-1 sometime this weekend.
Dum diddy dum diddy dum.